No.
Yeah. Okay. How many of you have to write a paper based on this? Okay, got one. Okay. So I was about to say, if you have a paper assigned, I could say, this would be a great point in your paper. So I'll try to give you that.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm here to help. Thank you all for coming. This is really great. I hope this, at any time, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to stop and ask. Since we are a small and intimate group, feel free to interrupt and ask questions at any time, too. So my name is Meredith Smith. I'm the Title IX coordinator here at Tulane. I've been here since December, so this is my first summer with y'all. It is really hot. Just get ready for it. I am here, and I'm joined with a lot of my colleagues who work as investigators here at Tulane, the investigators of Tulane, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves when their photos pop up in a little bit. So just hang on there and get excited in advance. Your excitement is overwhelming me. It's blowing me away. We're just so happy to have you all here and to have this opportunity to actually talk about some of these issues that we know are really important on our campus with regards to how we deal with sexual violence. And one of the big ways that we deal with sexual violence is our disciplinary process. So first I want to explain to you a little bit about Title IX, and then what we do when we receive reports. What does that reporting process look like? And then jump on into the disciplinary process in full. We're going to walk right on through that. Then I want to highlight that there are a lot of schools that are under investigation now, and it's because there are concerns about how they run their process. So we'll talk about some larger areas of concern and how Tulane is making sure that we're addressing those areas proactively, so that way we don't have those types of problems here. And then lastly, all of your questions. I know you will have tons of them all night long. We'll be here till tomorrow morning. Yeah, see, these are the good jokes. If you don't laugh now, it's going to be a really long hour together. So let's start with talking about Title IX. This is the godmother of Title IX. Her name is Bunny Stadler. And she's got a little button that says, God bless you, Title IX. I found that on Google Images, and I just thought that was fantastic. So Bunny was a professor at the business school at the University of Maryland. She was adjuncting, so she wasn't a full professor, but she applied for a tenured position, and she was denied. Well, the reason why she was denied is because Bunny, you see, was just too strong and too aggressive as a woman. So they didn't want her in the department. So I read that Bunny then went home after she got that news. This is in 1968. Went to her husband and was in tears saying, "Am I too strong?" And her husband said, "How many strong men are there?" And she said, "All of them." And he said, "Isn't it time for us to have all of the women be strong too?" And so the next day, Bunny got herself back up. She went to the Department of Labor, where she had a friend, and said, "Isn't this discrimination based on sex? How do we get them?" And through Bunny's efforts, 250 schools were sued for engaging in sexual discrimination around their hiring practices. And her work inspired some congresswomen to then say, shouldn't we be dealing with this like head on? People shouldn't have to sue schools. We should guarantee that schools treat every person equally on the basis of sex. It looks like we need to pass a law. This is back when Congress did things. So they then got together and wrote legislation to deal with the fact that there wasn't any legislation protecting sexual discrimination. That's how Title IX came about. Here's a fun fact for you. So they write Title IX that says that you cannot treat people differently on the basis of sex and education, but then they didn't go around and lobby on it because they were too afraid that people would say, wait a second, we have to treat men and women equally? Oh no, we won't vote for that. Instead they kept it really quiet, and Title IX sailed through. So now that's how we have this law that says that no person in the United States shall be discriminated against on the basis of sex in the course of an educational program or activity. Where are you sitting right now? That's not rhetorical. Where are you sitting?
Here.
Here. Here. And would you consider this to be an educational program or activity?
Yes.
Yes, because I am lecturing at you, so that's quite educational. Well, it doesn't matter if you're in the food court of the LBC, Bruff Commons, a residence hall room, or the quad. Every single part of Tulane is considered an educational program or activity. So every part of Tulane then gives you that protection of not being discriminated against on the basis of sex. So what do we talk about? What is sexual discrimination? That means that if I'm going to hire all of you, I'm going to hire all of you. Congratulations, fellow employees. I'm going to pay all of the men in the room, oh, what's something really fair? $120,000 monthly. I got crazy money. So $120,000 for y'all. Ladies in the room, $200,000. Beyonce says that we rule the world, so I'm paying you accordingly. Does anyone have a problem with this? Yeah, why?
Because we are one of the last one of the
Yeah, I shouldn't be treating the men and the women differently, and saying it's because you are men and women. That's sex discrimination. But then there are types of sex discrimination that are more specific. So let's say that I engage in an act of a sexual nature that you find unwelcome. That's a form of sex discrimination called sexual harassment. Now, if I then engage in those unwelcome sexual acts and have them be of physical contact or other engagement, well, that would constitute other prohibited activity. We'll get to that in a moment. Spoiler alert. I know you're so excited. But before we get into what these activities are, you need to know that if I engage in sexual discrimination, if Tulane does, if any of your fellow students do, if any faculty or staff do against you, we as a university have to do three things. We have to end the harassment, prevent its reoccurrence, and then remediate its effects. So stop, prevent, and then fix. That's our job. And what we're trying to then respond to are four major types of sexual discrimination: sexual harassment, sexual assault, which is the most severe form of sexual harassment, and then two other forms of intimate partner violence: stalking and intimate partner violence. So that would be a dating relationship or a domestic relationship, like a marriage or people who live together, violence in that relationship. When we learn about these things, well, you just learned we've got a duty to act. So in other words, we can't keep things quiet here. I never understood that the liars didn't go to the police. The truth is that if we learn about incidents, we have to act against them. I was going to show y'all a video here, just a second. My computer restarted, so just a moment. Talk amongst yourselves.
Collins did a really great job. He likes it.
Pardon?
Collins did a really great job. He likes it.
Why, thank you. And just wait, it's gonna get better.
His first college lecture.
Oh yes, welcome. This is how it's always like, right guys?
Versus team. That's as good as it gets. Oh man, I've never had more fun in my life. Daddy's had a beer. You want to go to another one, Dave? Yeah. Is your beer?
No, the more stop doing that, the not good at it.
Guys! Oh, dude! There's a bear in your other room here.
What? Oh, that's just a big, angry, hungry bear. Just pretend it's not there.
Oh, really? It'll just go away? What are you talking about?
No, I don't think it's going anywhere, but I don't know what to do about it, so I just ignore it.
So it's like it's not dangerous, right?
Define dangerous. It's a bear. But, you know, it's not going to eat all of us. It only eats like 1 in 5. I said only 1 in 5, so we're fine. There's a lot, man.
That means one of us is going to be east.
Statistically, that doesn't mean 1 of us. It means 1 in 5 each.
Doing something about this, man.
Hey, what do you want me to do about it? You guys know the old saying, bears will be bears.
That's not a saying.
Lamar, a bear will be a bear. So,
You can't just blame the bear. Not when it's attacking 20% of the people who come here.
20%. I said 1 in 5.
It is. That's 20%.
No, it isn't. It's 1 in 5. You math nerd. Let's pile on this guy.
You gotta get rid of this thing. Or at least warn us that there's a bear in the other room, man. We gotta look out for each other. What are you doing?
Hey, what happens between you guys and the bear is none of my business.
Hey, how is this none of your business, man? 1 in 5 people are gonna get attacked
why we don't ignore what's going on in our college campuses, because if it was a bear attack, we would all be responding. So same is true if we learn that 1 in 5 of our college students are being assaulted, which is what we know. So when I said before that we don't ignore incidents that happen here, partly it's because we are trying to kill the bear. We want to end 1 in 5. But also it's because we really care about you. It says I have a medical condition, and it's called caring too much. Clearly nobody watches Parks and Rec but me. A lot, since I've used 2 of those GIFs so far. But it's because we care about what happens to our students. You deserve to have an education where you feel safe and you're able to concentrate on your schoolwork and not having to deal with the fact that somebody has hurt you. So that's why we then have the reporting systems that we do. Let's dive into that a little bit. So when we hear about an incident of sexual violence that happens on our campus, either sexual assault, sexual harassment, intimate partner violence, or stalking, that report then gets routed to CMVSS. That's an office called Case Management and Victim Support Services. Their job is to provide people with support and with help. And so they'll send an email out to the person and say, I heard that you're going through a difficult situation. Can I help? Would you like to meet? You can choose whether or not you want to meet with that person, but we're always going to reach out because we care about you. Sorry, unfortunately you picked a university that cares about you. You should have gone someplace less cool. When CMVSS reaches out, they're always going to offer support and assistance. Sometimes that looks like putting a no contact order into place between 2 people. That is, you say you don't want this other person to speak to you anymore, email you, be able to run up to you and stare at you. We're able to put something into place that says no contact. If we had 2 people in this room who had a no contact order in place, let's say Megan and Dawn, if Megan sneezes, Dawn doesn't say bless you. That's what it means. You're strangers to each other and slightly rude, but we'll excuse it. We can also send notes to professors. Let's say that you had to miss class because you were meeting with an investigator, or you were meeting with a victim advocate, or with a counselor, or with the police. We're able to send a letter to your professor saying, please excuse the student, they had to deal with a personal matter. We're not going to let them know what's going on, but we're going to let them know that you need to be excused. So these are the types of support things that victim services can offer. But what they're also going to explain to you is that you have a choice. If somebody has hurt you here at Tulane, you have the option of pursuing discipline against that person. To say, you hurt me, and you should be held accountable for that. So we give students the choice of whether they do not want to proceed with the process, and therefore we just concentrate on support, or we can move forward with the disciplinary process and schedule a meeting with conduct. Oh, isn't this a great idea to meet the people who actually do this work? I think so. Look at all of their pictures. I know you might be embarrassed, but I'm going to make you stand up and say who you are. So I think when we talk a lot about conduct and the Office of Institutional Equity, and even the Title IX coordinator, then these offices then don't seem like real people. And so I want to make sure that y'all know that there are real people who do this work. And if you are somebody says to you, would you like to talk to conduct? You know that you're really talking to Jessica, Vanessa, and Dawn. So Dawn, why don't you start by saying who you are, how long you've been at Tulane, and why do you do the work?
Hi, I'm Dawn Broussard. I have now officially been at Tulane for a little over 2 weeks, but I have worked in student conduct for a few years now. And the reason why I do the work is I know how important being educated is to all of you, and we don't want anything to be an obstacle to that. So if we can help in any way to make sure that you stay in school, get your degree, that's what we want.
Vanessa.
Hello, everybody. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, and I'm the director of the Office of Student Conduct. So I've been here for a little bit over 1.5 years now, I think in describing why I do the work that I do, it's important to say a little bit about my background. So I'm an attorney, but I was a psychotherapist for many years before that, about 8 years before that. And my goal is really to have a fair and robust, really kind of thorough process for this, because I know it affects everybody involved. So I want to make sure it's fair and robust, and also to help students really progress and grow no matter what side that they're on. So really help them to learn resilience, help them to learn accountability, and give them all the necessary tools that they will need to succeed, whether it be at this university or not a university.
Thank you. Wendy's, who also has the most seniority of all of us.
Hi, good afternoon, evening. I don't get to say that too often. I'm so glad to actually be a part of this. Some of this is my favorite part. So my name is Wendy. I'm the director of the Office of Institutional Equity. It's a long title to say that we're part of the groups here at Tulane that administer Tulane's discrimination policies. I've been here for about 5 years now. Prior to that, I was an attorney and a litigator here in New Orleans, and I think that really motivated a bit of why I'm so happy with the change. So for years, I did legal work in terms of litigation, and by the time you work on things, facts have already happened, things have happened, and as a case progresses, and then it gets handed off to you, and I felt like I wasn't really a part of a solution. I felt like we were just working with liability and issues about things that had happened to people at some point in time. But what our jobs here at Tulane we get to do is things are evolving, and I really think that we have opportunities to help people in a moment in time and help direct and hopefully have good outcomes with things. And so I think it's really important that we engage with people from the very beginning of an incident or something they have questions about, and we start working with them and hopefully get to good outcomes where litigation hopefully isn't something that has to be a part of their lives. And so that's why I find it really rewarding.
Jessica.
Hi everybody, my name is Jessica Mullally, and I am an employee for about the same as Dawn, 2 weeks. And I come from a background of criminal law, so I've prosecuted and defended people in the criminal justice system. And I think that the most important part of my job and of the office is to make people feel comfortable coming forward, comfortable talking about really uncomfortable subjects without being stigmatized, without being pointed at, and without feeling creepy or scared to come forward. So, nice to meet you.
Thank you. And Wendy has two colleagues who aren't here this evening. Deborah Love, who's the Vice President of, her exec title is Vice President of Institutional Equity. She's also the Special Assistant to the President. Excuse me. And then there's Candace Hamilton, who's the Associate Director of OIE, even though it just says Associate. She's the associate of all of us. So these are the people who do this work on campus. And I want to note that when we look here at this process, this idea that students get to choose whether they want to go forward in the disciplinary process or not, that's a big thing. I think when we hear that somebody's been sexually assaulted, you want then the university to go find the person who did it and then discipline them. But most people who experience sexual assault, they don't want discipline. What they're really looking for is support. So that would be a good point in a paper. But that idea that the disciplinary process for a lot of people is really difficult. It's hard to come forward and talk about things that have happened to you to strangers. Of course, for you all, they're not strangers anymore. Look how that happened. Now, I want to note that we are not law and order, so when we talk about investigations and you're expecting then Olivia Benson and company to show up, that's not how we really operate.
What?
I know. I only wish Ice-T was one of our employees here. That would make every day like a lot more cool. Not that you all aren't cool. But it's because we're not a criminal system. We're not the police. We're not running a prosecutor's office. We're a university. And because we're a university, then our mission is to foster this educational environment, this place where you all get to learn and grow and explore who you are, so that way when you enter our larger society, you're doing so in a really well-formed place. You're going to go out there and do good. So when thinking about the idea that we're trying to protect our educational community, we don't have the ability to subpoena people or to force them to participate. Well, that's the same thing as a subpoena. We also can't chase people down and break down their doors and do other dramatic law and order type things. Oh, no, we can't do any of that. What we can do is enforce our own expectations. The other reason why we're not law and order is because Olivia Benson is not real. On that show, they're always able to make like that law and order twist, so it always resolves really well. The evidence always comes through. Or that creepy guy that you're like, he must be the rapist because he's creepy. Doesn't look like that. Things are a lot more difficult for us, but that's why we do the work too. So if something happens, then we move to what's called a procedural review with the reporting student. And here again, the student gets to choose whether they want to proceed forward with the disciplinary process. Let's say they don't want to go forward. They've come and they've met with Vanessa for this procedural review to learn more about what the conduct process looks like, and then decides, no, sorry Vanessa, I don't want to do anything more. Usually, if we know the name of the person who's alleged to have harmed the other, we'll have a conversation with them. Well, Vanessa will have a conversation with them to say, we learned about this incident, just know we know about it. We're watching you. Keep your P's and Q's and other letters well under control. Is there anything else you'd add, Vanessa?
Yeah, I would say that sometimes the reporting student doesn't want their identity to be revealed, and in most cases we try our best to honor that. And so it might just be a conversation where I'll invite the other student and say, hey, there's been a report that you may have potentially engaged in behavior that violated the code, and I'll specify it's under sexual misconduct. And I'll say there at this point we don't have enough information to file charges, but that doesn't mean that charges won't be filed in the future if we have enough information to do so. And I just want to make sure that you understand the behavioral expectations of the university so that you can make sure that your behavior from now forward, aligns with those expectations. So we can, in most cases, honor that the reporting student's wish to not reveal their identity or specific circumstances that would identify who's reporting that. And there are, other circumstances that might be different, but that's usually the case.
Wendy, I know your office investigates when there are faculty and staff who are accused of misconduct. Does things look different when there's a faculty or staff member who's accused of potential sexual harassment or violence?
It's going to mirror the same process, especially with what we're looking at here, is where does the complainant, what are their wishes and what do they want to do? And so we, of course, respect that as well. And we have a similar conversation. Sometimes we don't have the code, that we only have Tulane's discrimination policy. And so we can have conversations with people about that. And in fact, generally we can be a little bit more Olivia Benson-ish-esque because employees are held to the employee handbook and staff handbook, and they have to cooperate with investigations and meet with us. And so if there's somebody that we want to talk to about their behavior, in the academic environment, we'll have that conversation with them. But one of the important things is holding what somebody wants in terms of if they want to be identified. People are allowed to remain anonymous, and we're going to honor that, like Vanessa was saying. But we really want to make sure it's protected the community. So we're going to make sure we take those steps to do that.
So let's say a student wants to go forward with the process then. Well, let's move on. What's the next step then? Well, it moves on then to, our disciplinary process really gets going. And we've got a few things that we need to be really careful about in our process. What is it that we're guaranteeing to all of the students involved? And that's called due process. Due process says that we need to provide adequate notice to people about what's going on. What are you being charged with? And when are we going to have our meetings? So that way they're not like in a secret and then we say, oh, we had a meeting already. We have expelled you forever and ever. Sorry. Wish you had been there. No, we have to tell you about these things. We also need to make sure that if a person is going through our process, they have the opportunity to be heard, to be able to say what their experiences were, and to provide additional information into the situation. So that's how we're providing somebody due process in our process. So as we built our procedures, they've got this in mind. The first is that, next step is that we interview the reporting student. So So if somebody has come forward and said, I was sexually assaulted, after they meet with Vanessa, then they have an interview. So that way we can gather information to determine what the appropriate charges are. We've talked about the student code. So we take that information and then kind of put it right on top of the student code and say, based on this, what do we think are appropriate to say somebody has allegedly violated the code or not? So what do I mean by that? Let's take this scenario where a student named Anne reports that she had had 10 shots of tequila. True, also, ew. But after having 10 shots of tequila, she passed out on her friend Dale's couch. She woke up to find him, as she said, raping her or penetrating her without her consent. She said she was way too drunk to give consent and that she didn't want this to happen. So this is the information that she's given us. What then is the appropriate charge under the code? Well, we're going to look first to our sexual assault provision, which is that sexual assault consists of sexual intercourse that occurs without consent. Well, and underneath that then, here's our sexual intercourse definition, which says any penetration, however slight, with any object or body part performed by a person upon another person. So that would meet what we were told by Anne. We also know, as we move forward then, that we're going to need to look at our consent definition. Consent here at Tulane is knowing and voluntary permission expressed clearly in words or actions to engage in mutually agreed upon sexual activity. It's the responsibility of the initiator to obtain clear and affirmative responses at each stage of sexual involvement. So now we'll be asking questions about how Dale obtained consent for sexual activity. We also know that in consent, it cannot be given if the following are present, like incapacitation. So we have another piece of the code we need to be thinking about. That is that an individual who is incapacitated is not able to make any rational, reasonable judgments, and therefore is incapable of giving consent. So that idea of being way too drunk, was she incapacitated? And to the point where it doesn't matter if she said yes or no, or anything else, no matter what she said, she was incapable of giving that consent. So I just kind of threw a lot at you. Are you still with me? Okay, cool. Are you the fox or are you the wolf? I am the fox. I'm grabbing dibs there. Okay, so now we're all still together?
Yes.
Excellent. Notice how all the old people in the room gave each other the fist. I'll be remembering that. So next we're going to move on to letting the person know that we have got information that says that they violated the student code and we're moving forward with our disciplinary process. So we'll send them a notice of charges. That's a letter saying, we've received information that you have possibly violated our code of conduct. Here, we want to meet with you. Know that you could bring an advisor into our meeting. Now, an advisor can be your best friend. It can be your favorite professor. It can be your favorite administrator. That would be me now. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you. It could be a lawyer. It could be your parents. You get to choose what your advisor looks like. This is a person who gives you support, helps you prepare for meetings and for preparing for hearings. The advisor really is advising you on how to be best ready to talk about your experiences. So you get to have an advisor for that first meeting. This is your procedural review as the respondent to go through. Here's everything that we've received, and now we want to give you an opportunity to speak. So we're going to be scheduling an interview with you. So allegation, rights under the code, because you receive rights as a student at Tulane to know exactly what you're guaranteed here. It's that whole due process thing coming back. You thought I was just talking about for no reason. No, your rights. And lastly, Vanessa's going to walk through what to expect. What's going to happen next? What do you need to get ready for? How does this all shape out? So the process continues into what I mentioned, interviews. There will be interviews that happen with multiple people and multiple times. So I once had a case that had 19 people that I had to interview. So I just lined them up and talked to every single one of them. And then I realized I need to come back and get second round interviews because as I talked to each person, they gave me information that then made me go, oh, I really need to ask Bobby again about what Susie just said. And so 19 people then doubled to a number that's very high, 38.
Correct.
Thank you. I was a creative writing major in college, so I could write you a beautiful sonnet. So we need to interview because we need to gather all of the information that we can to go back to the code and know how to make decisions based on that code language. So you get as much information as you can to make the best decisions out there. Just like I said, I just hit the button a little late. Now, during all of this, the investigator is the one who's doing the interviewing. So Vanessa did the procedural review with both the complainant and the respondent. The investigator then, in a student context, that's going to be either Jessica or Dawn, they will be doing all of these interviews. Now, you might be thinking, well, what's their role during all of this? Is their role to judge me and determine right away if I have done what I'm alleged to have done? No, what they're really doing is kind of like when you're researching for a major paper. They're going to gather all of the information that they can, so that way we can make the best decision possible as to whether or not there's a violation of our code. Sometimes the investigation process turns out that we just don't have anything that we can go on. But let's say that we do, and in most cases, we have enough that we've got a question that we need to answer. So, the investigation will then come to a close. We then prepare an investigation report, and that can be a lot of pages. There can be pretty lengthy. Wait, I'll pause and take a drink from my OIE cup. Product placement. Yes, you can get free stuff if you go to Wendy's office. We prepare a report that is a summary of all the information that was given to us through the course of the investigation, because we need to send this all to a hearing board. The hearing board will make the ultimate decision as to whether or not the code was violated. So it all needs to go there. So let's say that Dawn is the investigator in this case because she's sitting right in front of me. So Dawn's the investigator. She's going to put everything together, and we're going to go to the hearing board. Now, while Dawn's been investigating, we're preparing then for these two phases that are going to happen. First is the responsibility phase. Did the person actually violate the code based on the information that we have? Do we have sufficient information? And if we do find a person to be responsible, the hearing moves on to a second phase, which is sanctioning. Now, our boards are made up of 3 people, student, faculty, and staff. So each part of the university is represented. Now, if you think about the room, then there's going to be a pretty significant table. On one side, you will have the reporting student and the responding student. Usually, they both have advisors. You have the investigator smack in the middle between them. So Dawn, you have advisor, or reporting student, advisor, Dawn, advisor, responding student. On the other side of the table, you're 3 people on the board. And at the head of the table, you've got the chair of the process, which is usually Vanessa. You also sometimes have a court reporter just to keep things fun, and so that way we can have a record of what's gone on. We sometimes call in witnesses if they have information that the board really needs to dig into. They've got questions based on those summaries, and they need to ask some more. So the witnesses might come in. Know that at Tulane, we can't really force anybody, Olivia Benson style, to come and participate within the student context. If that's something you're saying to yourself, I wish that we had that ability, you can always join student government and help us pass that kind of resolution. So all through this, we need to make sure that there's an opportunity to be heard, that each student can present an opening statement and a closing statement. So that way, everything that they need to say can be heard. And if they've got questions based on all of this information, they can direct that. Now, it goes through the investigator. So let's say that I'm a hearing board member, and I've got a question based on this information. I'm going to write that down, pass it to the investigator, who will make sure that I'm asking something appropriate. If it's inappropriate, she's going to confer with the chair and say, I don't think we should be asking this. So anything that's really victim blaming or really concerning, the chair might say, that's not appropriate, or that's what you're trying to get is good, but let me reword it. Do you have any examples off the top of your head, Vanessa, of a question that you would reword?
Yeah, so sometimes, for example, they might ask something that has because sometimes advisors advise students to ask questions, and their advisors are attorneys, and so they kind of ask questions in the form that they would be asked in a criminal setting, so like in a cross-examination, so they're very leading, and ending with the words, "Isn't that true?" So for example, we don't ask leading questions, we ask open-ended questions because we don't want to put words in the mouth of the student. So they might say, when you showed up at the party that night, you had already had you had only had 1 shot of vodka, isn't that true? We would say, when you arrived at the party on this evening at this time, how many alcoholic beverages had you had before that?
Good example. And the reason why we're trying to get all of this information is because then it's evaluated by the board to see if we have a preponderance of the evidence to find a violation of our code. Does anybody know what preponderance means? Other than the people who work here. Let's go back to SVU. Have any of you seen SVU? Okay. So on Law and Order, what is the standard of evidence?
All criminal stuff.
All the criminal stuff. No, not clear.
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Ah, yes, because and you know Olivia's going to find that because she always does. So beyond a reasonable doubt is a really high standard. I can't have any real doubts because what happens if I find somebody guilty? You go to jail, and so what are you losing?
Life.
Your life, your freedom. In some states, you can never vote again. So we're taking a lot away from you, so we need to make sure that if we're about to make that heavy decision, that it is very well supported. So a preponderance standard, do you think is more or less than that? I heard whispers, but I'll have to speak up. Is the preponderance standard less than a reasonable doubt? What do you think? More or less. Here's reasonable doubt. Where do you think preponderance is? Down here or even higher? Less. That is an excellent guess. Why would we have a lower standard of evidence in a school than in a court? In a criminal system where I could throw you in jail. I'm going to put you in jail if I find you responsible of something. But here, if I find you responsible, what's the worst thing I can do? I could kick you out of school. Does kicking you out of school take away your freedom? Or your life? Or your ability to vote? Or the ability to fill out like a form? If I apply for a job at Barnes & Noble, which is true because I worked there for 7 years, if I work at, I know, true.
I know that.
You get an excellent discount at Barnes & Noble. It's like the best place to work if you're a nerd. When I applied to Barnes & Noble, you know what they asked me?
Criminal background.
What was that, Dawn?
If you had a criminal background.
And if I checked yes, do you think I would have gotten that wonderful job and that 30% off discount on all books?
No.
That is correct, which would have been the worst because that's how I afforded books in high school, was that sweet, sweet Barnes & Noble discount. So the idea that we need to make sure that we're protecting people a lot more, it isn't really apparent here. And another thing is that we're not a criminal system, we're a civil system. How many of you watched the shows about O.J. Simpson lately? Or know about O.J. Simpson? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so how many trials did O.J. have to go through? 2. You had the first one, the criminal one, he was found? Not guilty. And then there was a second one. Tell me about that one.
The family of, I think it was Gold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they, details kind of threw me off, but I know that they were trying him for
wrongful death,
yeah. And, he was found guilty.
He was found guilty. And what kind of court was that? You could phone a friend. The lawyer sitting next to you.
Civil.
Ah, civil court. Because a civil court can't take away your liberty. It can take away your money. but it can't take away your liberty or your rights. So we are a civil system. The worst thing that I can take away from you is your ability to have a seat here at Tulane. And that would be taking some of your money. So, civil system. What is the standard of evidence in the civil system? That is correct. Look at that. So we are a civil system. We have a civil standard of evidence. So preponderance is less. You know what preponderance actually means? It means more likely than. So it's more likely than not that this person violated the code. That's what we're trying to find out. So all of that information goes on all of those things we talked about before on the code to make a decision. So let's say that we have found that person responsible, that Dale guy that we talked about before. The hearing board then moves into the sanctioning phase. They call the students back. They say we have determined that there's sufficient information to find the student responsible for violating the code. So now we're going to hear from both students involved. Share with us what we need to think about as we sanction. The board will also take impact witnesses. So those are witnesses who are connected with the reporting student, the victim, to say how this incident has affected them. And the respondent has the ability to submit character witnesses, folks who say that this is what kind of person this is. So as you are sanctioning, what to think about. Now, I want you all to know, we assume that every single Tulane student has good character. So you don't need to prove that to us. We also know that people with good character and good people make mistakes. And we have to hold them accountable for that. Another thing that we then introduce here in the sanctioning phase is past misconduct. Let's say that I am going through a hearing, somebody has accused me of stalking, which is very possible considering that before all of you walked in and you heard how excited I was that Kate Hudson is in town. So let's say that I had trouble with boundaries with Kate Hudson because I hated 10 things I hate about, or whatever that was, 10 Ways to Lose It, whatever. Yeah, that movie sucked. Almost Famous, there we go. I am crazy about Almost Famous, so I'm gonna hunt down Kate Hudson. Tulane finds out about it and says, Meredith, you crossed a line. If we go into sanctioning, then all of my past misconduct needs to be told to the board because they need to know, have I been having trouble living within the expectations of our Tulane community? So let's say that my freshman year, I had a keg in the dorm. Yeah. And then I also was smuggling pandas illegally. And then after that, I had an illegal blackjack ring with the pandas. And then later in my sophomore year, I slid down those water slide things. Haven't you always wanted to do that? I did that. So at this point now, it's not just that I stalked Kate Hudson, it's that I am showing that I have blatant disregard for the rules here at Tulane. You can't hem me in, I do what I want. I want to have an illegal panda ring. Thank you. What would you be concerned about if I had all of these problems in my past? Would you want me to stick around? Yeah, you want to see what I'm going to do next. How can I top the panda ring and sliding down that? Maybe I'll chase down the president and throw a fish at him or something. But would you really want to have me as a member of your community? You get the exact same degree as me. Do you want your degree to be shared by somebody who doesn't care about the rules or care about you? So you might be thinking, is this a person we want to keep in the Tulane community? So when we then move into deliberation, then we're trying to figure out what the most appropriate sanction is. Whether you've got a lot of past misconduct, or in the case of sexual assault, that's so serious because you have hurt somebody so severely. We need to judge whether you can stay. Based on that then, with the sexual assault, the most likely outcome is suspension or expulsion from this university, time away from Tulane. Stalking and intimate partner violence are also very serious. You can be looking at the same serious outcomes. The recommended sanctions then, the board will decide, and then they're sent on to the Vice President of Student Affairs, that's Dr. Porter. And if we are recommending either suspension or expulsion, it not just goes to Dr. Porter, but also the provost. And we have a brand new provost. This is the first time I'm using his name, Provost Foreman. So the two of them then get to make the decision as to whether or not this is appropriate. There are also appeals, but that appellate process then is separate and after this. Now, after this, if you're a little confused, I wouldn't be surprised. But if you're feeling like super duper confident, that's okay too. But what I want you to know is that when we are moving forward with our process, we're trying to make sure that you are given all the fundamental fairness here at this institution, either if you're reporting something or if you're responding to something. And schools across the country have been struggling with this a little bit. And there have been a lot of common grounds of errors. So let's look at some of these major problem areas that we're seeing in other schools. One is that there are insufficient investigations. That would be that if Wendy's office or Vanessa's office receives a report that they don't gather, they don't look into this fully enough. Maybe they look at it and go, it's a Monday. The Bears are playing. I got better things to do. Or maybe it's because there's that belief that people who report about sexual assault, well, are they really telling the truth? That's been a struggle in the past for some schools. Also, you've got lack of victim supports for some schools, that when a student comes forward and says, I need help, they say, we don't really have help for you. You've got to do it on your own. We also see problems with transparency in education. You all should know exactly where to go if you need help. That's why you had to go through the online training this summer, and then Living Well at TU, and then Sex Signals, and then your professors encourage you to come to this, because we want to make sure you know. How many of you have seen the window clings in the bathrooms that tell you about the resources? Some familiar, yeah. If you look in the bathrooms here, look to see if in the bottom right-hand corner there is something that says confidential private. You're going to see them in a lot of bathrooms, and most of your residence hall bathrooms, because we want you to know where to turn to if you need support. Some schools struggle with that. We also see policy problems. So at the University of Montana, they had over a dozen different policies around sexual violence. And so you would look at one policy that referred you to another policy, but that policy was out of date, but it told you to look to another policy that was also out of date that directed you back to the very first policy in the first place. So you need to make sure that your policies actually talk to each other and are easy for people to understand. Where do I go for help? If it's a faculty or staff, I know this is OIE. If this is a student, I know this is conduct. Y'all didn't see it, but they raised their hands right behind you. It was very coordinated. Another problem area is training, that we're not telling students and employees about what our expectations are. And then lastly, there have been a lot of problems with athletic departments across the country. A lot of problems, like to the tune of $2 or $3 million worth of problems, like at Baylor in Tennessee. We need to make sure that when things happen within athletics, that they share them with the offices that do the investigations. What offices do investigations here? That would be OIE and conduct, not athletics. And so if an athletic department held on to a complaint, that would be a problem too. So I know that you are all just dying to ask questions. I can tell. Right. Do you have any questions that we can answer for you? You have a ton of people who are ready to throw information at you.
Can I ask a question and then answer it myself?
Well, that felt like a setup.
Right?
Yes, please, Vanessa.
So, I think it's amazing that students are out here tonight coming in to listen to this process and learn more about it. So, I'm going to make the big leap that either you guys are interested in either continuing your knowledge and developing knowledge of this process, or maybe being a part of this process, or know people who might want to be part of this process. So, going back to the conduct board issue, and there are students on the conduct board, we're going to be sending out emails soon requesting people, students, to apply to be on that conduct board. And so I would encourage you, if y'all can we do a thing where they can sign up? Can we have a paper? Can I borrow one of those pieces of paper?
Yep.
If you put your name on that, I'll make sure you all get that notice. If you were interested in applying, it's a very simple application. Hey, this is my year, this is my background, this is why I'm interested, and then we'll interview. And it's basically, the first day is a full day long process. We're going to do it on a weekend because we want more students to be able to come and not have to miss class. And then there's going to be, I call them booster shot trainings, of what you'll need to know to be able to be in the pool of board members to be able to adjudicate such matters. So I would encourage you guys, even if you guys yourselves aren't interested in doing this, to kind of spread the word to people who may be interested in being in the conduct board. It doesn't just deal with sexual assault cases, it deals with any case that may result in suspension or expulsion. So things like drug dealing or group hazing, things like that.
Illegal panda smuggling.
Illegal panda smuggling is at the top of the list,
Blackjack
obviously.
rings.
Blackjack rings. And it's very amenable to your schedule. So we send out a doodle poll. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but to see if you're available when we need board. So it's very amenable to your schedule. It's a really important service to the community. And it also happens to look really, really good on graduate school applications, especially law school and political science. And so I would encourage you guys to kind of look out for that and give your names and contact info if you're interested in that stuff.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Oh, I'm so glad I answered my own question.
Yes, what a great question. I know it was on your minds, all of you. Any other questions that we can answer? How about, so I really want to see Kate Harding speak. When is she speaking again? Yes, if you want to go to all of the Shifting the Paradigm events. Man, this t-shirt's wasted on all of you. If you would like to see Kate Harding speak, she's speaking on Thursday. This is the book that the freshmen, all of you freshmen were assigned. So she's speaking 7 p.m. Thursday night over at Dixon Hall. We're really excited and I hope it's a good night. So please come.
I'll be there.
Yeah, Wendy's going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
She's the Olivia Benson of Tulane, we've all established.
Mm-hmm.
And if nobody else has questions,
We'll be back here if you want to answer them.
we'll just say thank you. You were awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.